Welcome to the darkest corner of history, where vanity meets violence. From poisoners to predators, these women defied societal norms, leaving a trail of death and destruction in their wake. Watch till the end for the disturbing tale of Elizabeth Báthory, the woman who bathed in blood to stay beautiful. Get ready to meet the most notorious female serial killers in history. Number 5. Jane Toppan's life was a masterclass in deception, manipulation, and murder. Born in 1857 as Honora Kelly, she was the daughter of an Irish immigrant who had been institutionalized for mental illness. This tumultuous upbringing would set the stage for Jane's future actions. Jane began her career as a nurse, working at Cambridge Hospital in Massachusetts. She quickly gained the trust of her patients and colleagues, who admired her kindness, efficiency, and dedication. However, beneath this facade, Jane harbored a dark secret. She was addicted to morphine and had a fascination with death. As Jane's addiction worsened, she started experimenting with morphine on her patients. She would administer lethal doses, often under the guise of providing pain relief. Her methods were calculated and precise, making it difficult for anyone to suspect foul play. Jane's killing spree spanned several years, claiming the lives of at least 31 people but suspected to be more than 100, including patients, friends, and even her own family members. Her victims included men, women, and children, all of whom had trusted her with their care. In 1901, Jane's crimes finally caught up with her. She was arrested and charged with murder after a suspicious death at a hospital where she worked. As the investigation unfolded, the true extent of Jane's atrocities became clear. During her trial, Jane's defense team attempted to portray her as a victim of circumstance, driven by her addiction and mental health issues. However, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of her premeditated crimes. In the end, Jane was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. She spent the remainder of her days at Taunton State Hospital, where she died in 1938. Jane Toppan's story is a chilling reminder that even the most trusted individuals can hide dark secrets. Her case also highlights the importance of accountability and vigilance in the medical profession. Number 4. Miyuki Ishikawa's tale is a dark and unsettling chapter in Japan's history, a chilling combination of desperation, moral collapse, and calculated cruelty. Born in 1897 in Honjo, Miyazaki Prefecture, Miyuki rose to prominence as a respected midwife in Tokyo, managing a maternity home called Kotobuki Sanin. But beneath the veneer of professionalism, she was hiding a sinister secret. Post-World War II Japan was a nation ravaged by economic devastation. Families were struggling to survive, and the birth of illegitimate or unwanted children often spelled disaster. Many impoverished mothers, unable to care for their newborns, turned to Ishikawa's maternity home as a last resort. What these desperate parents didn't know was that the person they entrusted with their babies was about to make a horrifying choice. Ishikawa saw these infants not as lives to be nurtured but as burdens to be eliminated. Believing she was sparing them a life of poverty and suffering, she began neglecting the babies in her care, allowing them to die from starvation and lack of medical attention. But it wasn't just about misguided morality. She turned these tragedies into profit. Together with her husband and a corrupt doctor, she demanded money from parents, claiming it was cheaper than raising a child. The doctor would then falsify death certificates to cover their tracks. For years, the horrifying truth went unnoticed. Ishikawa's crimes only came to light in January 1948 when police stumbled upon the remains of several infants. Their investigation uncovered something even more horrific: the ashes of over 40 babies in a mortician's house and 30 more at a local temple. Authorities were unable to determine the total number of victims, but it was estimated to be in the hundreds, making Ishikawa one of history's most prolific female serial killers. When arrested, Ishikawa shocked the public by defending her actions. She blamed societal neglect, arguing that the lack of government support forced these tragic decisions. Her trial captivated Japan, as the nation wrestled with the moral questions her case posed. While she was sentenced to 8 years in prison, her term was later reduced to just 4 years, a punishment many saw as alarmingly lenient for the magnitude of her crimes. Miyuki Ishikawa's story isn't just about one woman's horrifying actions, it's a reflection of a society pushed to its breaking point. Her case exposed the failures of a nation unable to care for its most vulnerable and sparked debates that led to significant reforms, including the legalization of abortion for economic reasons in 1949. To this day, her name remains synonymous with a chilling blend of compassion warped into cruelty, leaving behind a legacy that is as haunting as it is thought-provoking. Number 3. Delfina and Maria de Jesus Gonzalez were born into a harsh world of poverty and abuse in rural Mexico. Their father, a tyrannical man, controlled them with an iron fist, shaping the sisters into calculating and ruthless women. By the 1950s, the sisters sought a way out of their dire circumstances, turning to the sex trade as their ticket to wealth. Their plan began with small brothels scattered across Guanajuato and neighboring states. They presented themselves as entrepreneurs, but their business model was rooted in deception and cruelty. Young women, many barely out of their teens, were lured with promises of honest jobs as maids or housekeepers. Once the women arrived, the truth hit like a storm. They were trapped, enslaved, and forced into sex work under brutal conditions. Delfina and Maria de Jesus ruled with an iron hand, turning their brothels into houses of horror. Women who resisted were beaten. Those who fell ill or became unprofitable met even darker fates. The sisters didn't hesitate to kill to maintain their empire, burying victims in shallow graves on their properties. Clients, too, weren't safe. If they carried large amounts of cash, they could find themselves robbed and murdered. The sisters' reign of terror might have continued indefinitely had it not been for a stroke of fate. In 1964, a young woman escaped one of their brothels and ran straight to the authorities, unraveling the sisters' dark empire. When the police raided their property in San Francisco del Rincon, they unearthed mass graves. The chilling sight of decomposed bodies, many of them young women and newborns, shocked the nation. The estimated death toll ranged from 80 to 150, though the true number may never be known. The media turned the Gonzalez sisters into infamous figures, dubbing them Las Pacuanchis, a nickname that only added to their notoriety. Their trial became a spectacle, and the evidence of their crimes was so overwhelming that they were sentenced to 40 years in prison, the maximum punishment in Mexico at the time. Even in captivity, their story refused to fade. Delfina met a grim end in 1968 when a freak construction accident killed her in her cell, while Maria de Jesus served her time and quietly disappeared from public view upon release. The Gonzalez sisters' legacy is both a cautionary tale and a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. Their story isn't just about their crimes. It's about how systemic poverty, corruption, and inequality allowed two women to turn desperation into a nightmare for so many others. Their dark empire remains a haunting chapter in Mexico's history, a story told not just to horrify but to warn of what can happen when greed and cruelty go unchecked. Number 2. Amelia Dyer's story unfolds as one of the most chilling tales in Victorian England. Born in 1836, she began her life in the shadow of tragedy, losing her mother to mental illness at a young age. This early exposure to suffering may have planted the seeds of what would later become a horrifying career. Dyer trained as a nurse, a respectable occupation for women of her time, but the medical world also introduced her to the lucrative yet grim business of baby farming. In Victorian England, unwed mothers often faced immense societal shame and financial hardship. Many turned to baby farmers, people who offered to care for or adopt infants in exchange for money. It was a system rife with exploitation, but Dyer took it to horrifying extremes. She initially promised to care for the babies she took in, but over time, greed and cruelty replaced any semblance of compassion. She began neglecting the children, starving them to death, and pocketing the money. When neglect proved too slow, Dyer turned to outright murder, strangling infants with tape to hasten their deaths. To cover her tracks, she disposed of the bodies in rivers and other hidden locations. Her crimes escalated over decades. Moving frequently to avoid suspicion, she left a trail of dead infants and grieving mothers. Occasionally, authorities or neighbors grew suspicious, but Dyer was adept at reinventing herself. Her knack for evading justice allowed her to continue her monstrous acts. The net finally began to close in the 1890s. A suspicious midwife and a bundle of infant remains led police to Dyer's door. Investigators found damning evidence, including advertisements she had placed to lure desperate mothers. A search of the Thames uncovered more bodies, many bearing the telltale marks of her cruelty. In 1896, Amelia Dyer faced trial. Her courtroom demeanor was as chilling as her crimes. She showed little remorse, claiming insanity. The jury, however, was unconvinced. After just 5 minutes of deliberation, they found her guilty of murder. Dyer was sentenced to death and hanged later that year. Her execution marked the end of her reign of terror but left behind a haunting legacy. It is believed that she may have killed up to 400, or possibly more, infants, making her one of history's most prolific serial killers. Her case shocked Victorian society, highlighting the grim realities of baby farming and the desperate plight of unmarried mothers. Also, there are some Jack the Ripper speculation. Because she was a murderer alive at the time of the Jack the Ripper killings, some have suggested that Dyer was Jack the Ripper. This suggestion was put forward by author William Stewart, although he preferred Mary Piercy as his chosen suspect. There is, however, no evidence to connect Dyer to the Jack the Ripper murders, and she does not figure prominently among the Jack the Ripper suspects. Number 1. Elizabeth Báthory, often referred to as the Blood Countess, is one of history's most infamous figures, known for her alleged heinous crimes in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Born on August 7, 1560, in Hungary, she came from a noble family, which gave her considerable power and influence. As a young woman, Elizabeth was well educated, fluent in multiple languages, and known for her beauty. She married Ferenc Nadasdy, a soldier, and together they lived in a castle in Transylvania. Their marriage was initially happy, but after Nadasdy went off to war, Elizabeth's behavior began to change dramatically. Legend has it that Elizabeth became obsessed with youth and beauty. According to folklore, she believed that bathing in the blood of young girls would help her maintain her youth. This belief led her to lure numerous young women, often from the lower classes, to her castle under the guise of offering them employment. Once there, it is said that she subjected them to horrific torture and murder. The exact number of her victims is debated, with estimates up to 600 or more. The gruesome tales of her actions, including bloodletting and other forms of torture, contributed to her notoriety. In 1610, King Matthias II of Hungary ordered an investigation into her activities after reports of her crimes surfaced. Elizabeth was eventually arrested, and her trial was a sensational affair. However, due to her noble status, she was not executed. Instead, she was confined to her castle for the rest of her life. She died on August 21, 1614, and was buried in her family's crypt. Her story has been the inspiration for countless books, films, and legends, cementing her as a symbol of female monstrosity and a figure of horror in popular culture. Whether she was a sadistic murderer or a victim of political machinations remains a topic of debate. As we have seen, their crimes serve as a haunting reminder that evil comes in many forms, and sometimes, it wears a female face. These women defied societal norms and expectations, unleashing terror and destruction on their victims. Their crimes serve as a haunting reminder that evil comes in many forms, and sometimes, it wears a female face. Thanks for watching. If you want part 2, leave a comment and subscribe for more.